Write him letters. Lots of letters. Tell him stories about your life, your family history, things you want him to know. Tell him why you made the choices you made, what you learned from your mistakes. Be honest with him about your failures, but also about your love. Give him something to hold on to that's more than just "my dad was in prison." Will you give them to him? Dominic asked. The letters? When he's old enough to understand. Yes, Natalie promised. I will. Not because I forgive you for everything you did to me, but because Oliver deserves to know his father as a complete person, flawed and human and complicated, not just as the sum of his worst choices. That conversation marked a turning point in Natalie's relationship with Dominic. They would never be friends, would never fully trust each other again. But they found a way to be co-parents united in their love for Oliver, even as circumstances pulled them further apart. 2 weeks later, Dominic accepted the plea deal. He pled guilty to negligence and falsification of documents, agreeing to a 4-year prison sentence in exchange for the more serious fraud charges being dropped. He would serve at least 3 years before being eligible for parole, 3 years during which Oliver would grow from an infant into a child, developing language and personality and memories that wouldn't include his father. The day Dominic was sentenced, Gabriel showed up at the apartment with Indian takeout and the willingness to just sit with Natalie while she processed her complicated feelings about her ex-husband going to prison. They didn't talk much, just existed in the same space, eating samosas and watching Oliver play with soft blocks on a blanket on the floor. "Thank you," Natalie said finally. "For being here. For not asking me to explain how I can feel sad about Dominic going to prison when he's the one who destroyed our marriage. For just being here." "You're allowed to have complicated feelings," Gabriel said gently. "He's your son's father. You spent 8 years of your life with him. Those things don't disappear just because he made terrible choices. You can be angry about what he did to you and still feel sad about what he did to himself and to Oliver." "I wish I didn't care," Natalie admitted. "I wish I could just write him off as someone who got what he deserved and move on completely. But I can't, because Oliver loves him. I watch our son light up when Dominic walks in for visitations, watch him reach for his father with complete trust, and I know that when Dominic goes to prison, Oliver is going to suffer for it. And that breaks my heart." Oliver chose that moment to roll over, a new skill he'd just mastered, and they both applauded his achievement. The simple joy of celebrating a developmental milestone created a pause in the heavy conversation, a reminder that life continued, that there was beauty and growth even in the midst of crisis. Later that evening, after Oliver was asleep and Gabriel had left, Natalie stood at the window of her borrowed apartment looking out at the city lights. She thought about Dominic, probably in a holding cell awaiting transfer to whatever prison he'd serve his time in. She thought about Oliver, sleeping peacefully with no idea his life was about to change dramatically. She thought about Gabriel, whose consistent kindness was starting to feel like something she could maybe, possibly, allow herself to depend on. And she thought about herself, about the woman she'd been when this story started, standing in a courthouse parking lot with a newborn and a mission to shock her ex-husband. That woman had been angry, wounded, operating on determination and spite and the desperate need to protect her child. She was still that woman in many ways, still fierce and protective and willing to fight for what her son needed. But she was also becoming something else. Someone softer, more willing to accept help, more capable of compassion even toward people who'd hurt her. Someone who was learning that strength didn't mean handling everything alone, that vulnerability could coexist with resilience, that letting people care for her didn't diminish her independence. The darkest hour had come and passed, leaving her still standing, still functioning, still capable of imagining a future that didn't revolve entirely around survival. And while she knew more challenges lay ahead, Dominic's imprisonment, the practical realities of truly single parenting, the complicated feelings developing between her and Gabriel, she also knew she was strong enough to face them. Because she'd already survived the unsurvivable. Everything else was just details. 3 months into Dominic's incarceration, Natalie's life had settled into a new kind of normal. Oliver was 8 months old now, crawling everywhere with determined enthusiasm, pulling himself up on furniture, babbling in sounds that were starting to approximate actual words. He was a happy baby despite the upheaval in his young life, adaptable in the way only children can be, finding joy in simple things like splashing in the bathtub or playing peekaboo. Dominic called every week at the designated time the prison allowed, and Natalie would hold the phone to Oliver's ear so he could hear his father's voice. Oliver didn't understand what was happening, couldn't comprehend why Daddy wasn't coming for visitations anymore, but he seemed to respond to Dominic's voice with recognition, cooing and babbling in response. Dominic would talk to him about anything and everything, the books he was reading in prison, memories of his own childhood, promises about what they'd do together when he got out. And he was writing the letters, pages and pages that arrived weekly, documenting his thoughts and feelings and hard-won insights about who he'd been and who he was trying to become. Natalie had started dating Gabriel, though dating felt like too formal a word for what they were doing. They had dinner sometimes after Oliver went to bed, takeout eaten on the couch while watching movies or just talking. Gabriel came to the playground with them on weekends, pushing Oliver on the baby swings and making him laugh with silly faces. He was present but not pushy, affectionate but respectful of boundaries, exactly what Natalie needed as she slowly opened herself to the possibility of love again. But she was holding back, and they both knew it. She wouldn't let Gabriel stay over even after Oliver was asleep, wouldn't make plans more than a week in advance, wouldn't discuss anything that suggested a future together. She was protecting herself, maintaining emotional distance as insurance against potential heartbreak, and Gabriel was patiently letting her set the pace even though she could see the frustration in his eyes sometimes. Her art career had experienced an unexpected revival. The scandal that had made her unemployable in the traditional gallery world had also made her story compelling to the alternative art scene. A small cooperative gallery had approached her about a solo show, specifically wanting her divorce paintings, the raw, emotional pieces she'd created during and after her separation from Dominic. The exhibition was scheduled for early December, just a few weeks away, and Natalie was simultaneously terrified and excited about exposing her pain so publicly. Patricia continued her weekly visits with Oliver, and she and Natalie had developed an unlikely friendship built on their shared love for the baby and their complicated feelings about Dominic. Patricia visited her son in prison regularly, maintaining that he was innocent despite his guilty plea, and she'd hired a new legal team to explore the possibility of appeal. But she never pressured Natalie to share her conviction in Dominic's innocence, seemed to understand that Natalie's relationship with her ex-husband existed in a different, more ambiguous space. Everything was tentatively okay, fragile but functional, until the day Patricia showed up for her visit looking drawn and worried in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. "We need to talk," Patricia said, settling onto the couch while Oliver played with blocks at her feet. "About Dominic's appeal." Natalie's stomach clenched. "What about it?" "His new attorneys believe they can prove that Dominic's former business partner, Richard Chen, falsified documents and then framed Dominic for the fraud. They have a witness, someone who worked in the accounting department, who's willing to testify that Richard explicitly told him to forge Dominic's signature on inspection reports. But there's a complication." "There's always a complication," Natalie said wearily. "The witness is only willing to testify if he's granted immunity, and the prosecutor is refusing to offer immunity unless we can provide additional corroborating evidence. The attorneys think that evidence exists in documents from your divorce proceedings, financial records that Dominic provided during asset division that might show irregularities in Richard's management of their shared accounts." Natalie stared at Patricia, processing what she was asking. "You want me to turn over my divorce documents to help prove Dominic's innocence?" "I'm asking you to consider it," Patricia said carefully. "I know you have no obligation to help him. I know he hurt you terribly and that you have every right to let him serve his sentence regardless of whether he's actually guilty. But Natalie, if he's innocent, if he's in prison for crimes he didn't commit while the actual criminal walks free, doesn't Oliver deserve to have his father exonerated? Doesn't Oliver deserve to have those years back, to grow up with a father who isn't branded a convicted felon? And if I look through those documents and find evidence that Dominic actually was involved in the fraud?" Natalie challenged. "What if instead of exonerating him, the evidence proves he was guilty and just got a plea deal? Do you still want me to turn everything over then?" Patricia met her eyes steadily. "Yes. Because the truth matters, whatever that truth is. If Dominic is guilty, he should serve his time and face the consequences of his actions. But if he's innocent, if he took a plea deal because he was terrified of spending 15 years away from his son and thought 3 to 5 years was the lesser evil, then he deserves the chance to clear his name." Natalie thought about Dominic's voice on their weekly calls, the genuine remorse in his letters, the way he'd broken down during that last visitation before his sentencing. She thought about Oliver, who would grow up with a father in prison either way, but whose understanding of that imprisonment would be very different depending on whether his father was actually guilty of the crimes he'd admitted to. "I'll look through the documents," she said finally. "But Patricia, I'm not promising anything. If I don't find evidence either way, I'm not manufacturing something to help Dominic. And if I find evidence that contradicts his claims of innocence, I'm turning that over too. The truth matters, like you said. Whatever that truth is." "Thank you," Patricia said, relief evident in her voice. "That's all I'm asking." That evening, after Oliver was asleep and Gabriel had left following their usual routine of dinner and conversation, Natalie pulled out the boxes of documents from her divorce. She'd packed them away months ago, not wanting to dwell on that chapter of her life, but now she spread them across the dining table and began the tedious work of reviewing financial statements, transaction records, and asset disclosures. It took 3 nights of late-night document review before she found it, a series of transfers from the business account to a personal account belonging to Richard Chen, each one dated and initialed. But the initials weren't Dominic's. They were R.C., Richard Chen's own initials, suggesting he'd authorized transfers to himself. And in the copies Dominic had provided during the divorce, there were notations in the margins in what Natalie recognized as Dominic's handwriting. Query these. R.C. won't explain why so many personal drawers. Need to audit. The document suggested that Dominic had noticed irregularities, had questioned them, had been trying to investigate before the scandal broke. They didn't definitively prove his innocence, but they strongly suggested he'd been a victim of his partner's fraud rather than a co-conspirator. Natalie sat back in her chair, staring at the papers spread before her, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She could turn these over to Dominic's attorneys, could potentially help him get his conviction overturned, could give Oliver back his father years earlier than expected. Or she could claim she'd found nothing useful, could let Dominic serve his full sentence, could maintain the current stability of her life without the complication of Dominic being released. Part of her, the part that still harbored anger about the betrayal, about the affair, about all the ways Dominic had failed her and their marriage, wanted to let him suffer. Wanted him to experience the full consequences of his choices, even if those consequences weren't entirely fair. He destroyed their marriage, had left her pregnant and alone, had prioritized his new relationship with Simone over his responsibilities. Didn't he deserve to lose years of Oliver's life the same way she'd lost the life she'd planned? But the larger part, the part that was a mother now and understood love and sacrifice in ways she hadn't before, knew that punishing Dominic meant punishing Oliver. If these documents could give Oliver more time with his father, if they could give Oliver the truth instead of a convenient lie, then she had to turn them over. Because being a good mother meant putting Oliver's needs before her own desire for revenge. She called Lena first thing the next morning. "I found something," she said without preamble. "Evidence that might help Dominic's appeal. And I think I need to turn it over, but I want you to review it first, make sure I'm not missing something that could backfire." Lena came over that evening, spreading the documents across Natalie's table and reviewing them with her attorney's eye for detail. After an hour of careful analysis, she sat back and let out a low whistle. "This is good," she said. "This is really good, Natalie. Combined with the witness testimony they're trying to secure, this could be enough to get Dominic's conviction overturned. At minimum, it would warrant a new trial where the actual evidence gets properly evaluated instead of being rushed through a plea deal." "So I should turn it over," Natalie said, not quite a question. "That depends," Lena replied carefully. "What do you want to happen here? Do you want Dominic to come home?" Natalie thought about that question, really thought about it. Did she want Dominic released from prison? Did she want him back in their daily lives, resuming regular visitations, being present for Oliver's milestones? "I want Oliver to have his father," she said finally. "Not the version who cheated and lied and destroyed our marriage, but the version who showed up for every visitation, who tried to learn how to change diapers, who writes letters every week trying to become someone his son can be proud of. If that version of Dominic can come home earlier because he's actually innocent of the crimes he was convicted of, then yes, I want that for Oliver. Not for Dominic, not even really for me. But for Oliver." "Then we turn over the documents," Lena confirmed. I'll coordinate with Dominic's legal team, make sure everything is properly authenticated and submitted. But Natalie, you should prepare yourself for what comes next. If this works, if Dominic gets out, your life is going to change again. He'll want more time with Oliver, more involvement in parenting decisions. The dynamic you've established while he's been in prison is going to shift, and that's going to be an adjustment. I know, Natalie said. But it's the right thing to do. And I'm tired of making decisions based on anger or fear or self-protection. I want to make decisions based on what's actually best for my son, even when that's hard or complicated or inconvenient for me. The documents were turned over to Dominic's attorneys the following week. Within days, they'd filed a motion for post-conviction relief, arguing that newly discovered evidence demonstrated actual innocence and warranted overturning the guilty plea. The witness who'd been hesitant to testify without immunity agreed to come forward once he saw the documentary evidence supporting his testimony. Richard Chen, Dominic's former business partner, was brought in for questioning and, faced with evidence of his fraud, ultimately confessed to having set Dominic up to take the fall. The legal process moved with unusual speed once the truth began to emerge. Within 6 weeks, Dominic's conviction was vacated, his guilty plea withdrawn, and all charges dismissed. Richard Chen was arrested and charged with the fraud Dominic had been convicted of, plus additional charges related to falsifying evidence and obstruction of justice. Dominic was released from prison 3 days before Christmas, having served just 5 months of a 4-year sentence. Natalie heard about his release from Patricia, who called her crying with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," Patricia kept saying. "Thank you for believing in him enough to look for the truth. Thank you for putting Oliver first. Thank you for being the kind of person who does the right thing even when it's difficult." That evening, Gabriel came over for dinner as usual, and Natalie told him about Dominic's impending release. She watched carefully for his reaction, trying to gauge how he felt about the complication this introduced into their developing relationship. "How do you feel about it?" Gabriel asked, turning the question back on her. "Conflicted," Natalie admitted. "Relieved that Oliver will have his father back. Anxious about how the custody arrangement will change. Worried that we'll fall back into old patterns of dysfunction. Grateful that the truth came out, but also kind of resentful that I was the one who had to find it and turn it over. It's complicated." "Everything worth doing is complicated," Gabriel observed. "But Natalie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you still in love with Dominic?" "No," Natalie said immediately, surprised to find it was completely true. "I'm not in love with him, Gabriel. I don't want him back. I don't fantasize about our marriage being restored. What I feel toward him is complicated co-parent feelings. Care for him as Oliver's father, frustration with his past choices, hope that he can actually be the man he's been trying to become. But not romantic love. That died a long time ago." "Good," Gabriel said, and then, before Natalie could respond, he was kissing her. Really kissing her, not the careful, restrained kisses they'd shared before, but something deeper and more honest, something that communicated need and desire and commitment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers and said, "I'm in love with you, Natalie. I have been for months. I know the timing is terrible, I know your life is complicated, I know Dominic getting out is going to make everything more difficult. But I needed you to know. I'm in love with you, and I'm not going anywhere." Natalie felt tears gathering in her eyes, but these were good tears, healing tears. "I think I'm in love with you too," she admitted. "I've been too scared to say it, too worried about getting hurt again. But Gabriel, when I look at you, when I think about my future, you're in it. You and Oliver and me, building something together. That's what I want." "Then that's what we'll have," Gabriel promised. "Whatever complications come with Dominic being released, whatever adjustments we have to make, we'll figure it out together. Because you're not alone anymore, Natalie. You haven't been alone for months, even if you were too scared to admit it." Oliver woke up from his nap at that moment, his cries coming through the baby monitor, and Natalie laughed through her tears. "Perfect timing as always," she said, standing to get him. Gabriel stood too, following her to Oliver's room. "I'll come with you. If we're building a future together, I should probably get good at the middle of the night wake-ups and the interrupted romantic moments." you say that now, Natalie warned, but she was smiling as they walked together to get her son, as they navigated the mundane moment of infant care that was really about so much more, about partnership, about showing up, about building the kind of family that wasn't defined by biology but by choice and commitment and love. Dominic called that night, his first call from outside prison in 5 months. His voice sounded different, lighter, more hopeful, but also uncertain, as if he wasn't quite sure how to navigate this new reality. "I'm out," he said unnecessarily. "They release me this afternoon. My attorneys are working on getting my record expunged, getting me officially exonerated, but Natalie, I'm out. I'm free. And I can see Oliver again, really see him, not through prison visitation glass." "I'm glad," Natalie said, and meant it. "For Oliver's sake, I'm glad. When do you want to do your first visitation?" "Tomorrow?" Dominic asked hopefully. "I know that soon, I know you probably need time to adjust, but I've missed so much already. He's probably changed so much in 5 months. I want to see my son." "Tomorrow works," Natalie agreed. "Come by at 2 p.m. "And Dominic?" "Things are different now. Oliver is different, I'm different, the whole situation is different. We're going to have to figure out a new normal, establish new boundaries and expectations. This isn't just picking up where we left off." "I understand," Dominic said. "And Natalie?" "Thank you. Patricia told me you're the one who found the evidence, who turned it over even though you had no obligation to help me. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting Oliver first even when it would have been easier to let me serve my full sentence." "I didn't do it for you," Natalie reminded him. "I did it for Oliver. He deserves to know the truth about his father, deserves to have you in his life if you're actually innocent of what you were convicted of." Still, Dominic persisted. "Thank you. I won't waste this second chance, Natalie. I promise you that." After they hung up, Natalie sat in her quiet apartment with Oliver sleeping peacefully in her arms and Gabriel beside her on the couch, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone trying to survive impossible circumstances, but the steady, grounded hope of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged with clarity about what actually mattered. Dominic was out of prison. Gabriel loved her. Oliver was healthy and happy. Her art exhibition was in 2 weeks. Patricia had become an ally instead of an adversary. She had a home, enough money to pay bills, a community of support. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she married Dominic 8 years ago. It wasn't the fairy tale ending of happily ever after with the man she'd thought was her soulmate. But it was something potentially better, a life built on truth instead of illusion, on genuine connection instead of obligation, on her own strength and resilience instead of dependence on someone else's stability. The turning point had come and passed, and Natalie found herself standing on the other side of crisis, looking toward a future that felt full of possibility instead of just survival. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. Not alone, but with people who genuinely cared, who showed up consistently, who proved through daily actions that love was about more than just words. Dominic arrived at Natalie's apartment the next afternoon at exactly 2 p.m., dressed in casual clothes that hung loose on his prison-thinned frame, holding a small bag that presumably contained toys or books for Oliver. He looked nervous, younger somehow, as if incarceration had stripped away some of the arrogant confidence that had always been part of his persona. When Natalie opened the door, they stood there for a moment, both uncertain about the appropriate greeting for this strange situation. "Hi," Dominic said finally. "Thanks for letting me come so soon." "Hi," Natalie echoed, stepping back to let him in. Oliver just woke up from his nap, so he's alert and in a good mood. Fair warning though, he's much more mobile than when you last saw him. Crawling everywhere, pulling up on furniture, getting into everything he shouldn't. As if to demonstrate, Oliver appeared around the corner, crawling at impressive speed, and then stopped abruptly when he saw Dominic. His face went through several expressions: confusion, uncertainty, and then, miraculously, recognition. He broke into a huge smile and babbled something that might have been an attempt at dada, reaching his arms up in the universal toddler demand to be picked up. Dominic's face crumpled with emotion. He dropped to his knees and scooped Oliver into his arms, holding him close and crying openly. "Hi, buddy," he choked out. Hi, Oliver. Oh God, I missed you so much. You got so big. Look at you, you're practically a different person. Oliver seemed remarkably unconcerned with his father's emotional state, more interested in grabbing at Dominic's face and pulling his hair with enthusiastic curiosity. Natalie watched them, feeling her own throat tighten with emotion despite her determination to maintain some professional distance. Whatever anger she still harbored toward Dominic, she couldn't deny that he genuinely loved his son, that the bond between them was real and important. They spent the next 2 hours like old times, Dominic learning Oliver's new skills and preferences, Natalie guiding him through updated routines. Oliver was eating solid foods now in addition to nursing, had specific opinions about which toys he preferred, could communicate basic needs through sounds and gestures. Dominic took mental notes, asked questions, documented everything in his phone as if he were studying for the most important test of his life. "He's amazing," Dominic said during a quiet moment while Oliver was absorbed in stacking blocks. "I can't believe how much he's developed in just 5 months. He's got such a personality now, such clear preferences and opinions." "Children do that," Natalie observed. "They grow and change constantly. It's part of what makes parenting both terrifying and wonderful. You can never quite keep up with who they're becoming." Dominic looked at her then, really looked at her, seeing her properly for what felt like the first time in years. "You look good," he said quietly. "Happy. Different from when we were married. Like you've come into yourself somehow." "I have," Natalie confirmed. "Turns out surviving the unsurvivable and raising a baby alone makes you discover strengths you didn't know you had." "I'm not the same person I was when we were together, Dominic. I'm someone different now. Hopefully someone better." "You were always good," Dominic said. "That was never the problem. The problem was me not being able to see it, not appreciating what I had until I destroyed it completely." Before Natalie could respond to that, her phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel. "How's the first visit going? I can come by if you need backup or just want someone else there. Whatever you need." She smiled at her phone, at this man who understood her so completely, who knew she might need support but would never pressure her to accept it. "That's him, isn't it?" Dominic said, noticing her expression. "The guy my mother mentioned. Gabriel something. The nurse who helped you during everything." "Gabriel Moretti," Natalie confirmed, deciding there was no point in hiding it. "We've been dating for the past few months. It's serious, Dominic. He's going to be part of Oliver's life going forward." She watched Dominic process this information, saw several emotions flicker across his face: surprise, hurt, jealousy, and finally, resignation. "Does Oliver like him?" he asked finally. "He loves him," Natalie said honestly. "Gabriel's great with kids, he's a pediatric nurse, it's literally his job. And he's been incredibly patient and supportive through all of this mess." "Good," Dominic said, and he seemed to mean it. "That's good. Oliver deserves to have stable, loving adults in his life. If this Gabriel guy makes you happy and treats my son well, then I'm grateful he exists." "Really?" Natalie asked skeptically. "Because you don't sound particularly thrilled about your ex-wife having a boyfriend." "I'm not thrilled," Dominic admitted with brutal honesty. "Part of me, the selfish, irrational part, still wishes we could somehow magically fix everything that went wrong and be a family. But the rational part, the part that's had 5 months of solitary time to really think about my choices and their consequences, knows that ship sailed long ago. I destroyed our marriage. I destroyed your trust. And even though I was ultimately innocent of the crimes I was convicted of, I was absolutely guilty of the crimes I committed against you and our relationship. You deserve to be happy, Natalie. You deserve someone who shows up consistently and treats you well. If that's Gabriel, then I'm genuinely glad you found him." Oliver chose that moment to topple his block tower, looking very pleased with the destruction he'd caused. Both adults laughed, the tension breaking, and they spent the rest of the visitation just being present with Oliver, navigating the new reality of co-parenting while both involved with other people. After Dominic left, Gabriel came over with Thai food and moral support. Natalie fell into his arms the moment he walked through the door, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the afternoon. "How was it?" Gabriel asked, holding her close while managing to balance takeout containers. Complicated, Natalie said. But okay. Actually better than okay. Dominic was humble, respectful, genuinely grateful to see Oliver. He didn't try to push boundaries or make demands. And when I told him about us, about you being in Oliver's life, he was immature about it. Acknowledged that you're good for us. That must have been hard for him, Gabriel observed, setting down the food and guiding Natalie to the couch. Probably, Natalie agreed. But it's the reality he has to accept. He doesn't get to dictate how I live my life or who I love. That privilege ended when he served me with divorce papers. Speaking of who you love, Gabriel said carefully. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About us building a future together. And I need to know what that actually means to you. Are we talking abstract future possibility, or are we talking concrete plans? Natalie looked at him, at this man who'd been steady and patient and consistently present through the worst year of her life. She thought about how he'd helped her move, how he'd brought coffee and groceries, how he'd babysat Oliver without expecting anything in return. She thought about how he looked at her like she was beautiful even when she was covered in spit up with her hair unwashed, how he listened to her concerns without trying to fix everything, how he made her feel seen and valued and loved. I'm talking concrete plans, she said firmly. I'm talking about me and you and Oliver building a life together. I'm talking about eventual marriage if that's something you want. I'm talking about being a family, Gabriel. Not someday, not in some distant abstract future, but actually starting to build that now. Gabriel's smile was brilliant, transforming his face into something so joyful it made Natalie's heart skip. Yes, he said simply. Yes to all of that. Yes to marriage eventually, yes to being Oliver's family, yes to building a life together. Absolutely yes. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Natalie's breath caught. It wasn't a ring box, it was too large for that, but it was clearly something significant. Gabriel opened it to reveal a key. This is the key to my apartment, he said. I know you're staying in my sister's place, and that's fine for now. But when you're ready, when you feel like the timing is right, I want you and Oliver to move in with me. Not because you need help with rent or because you're struggling financially, but because I want to wake up to you every morning. I want to be there for the 2 a.m. feedings and the teething crying and all the chaos that comes with raising a baby. I want us to be a real family, living together, making decisions together, building something permanent. So this key is here whenever you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. Just know that my home is your home, always. Natalie took the key with shaking hands, feeling the weight of what he was offering. Not just practical assistance, but genuine partnership. Not just romance, but commitment. Not just love, but the daily choice to show up and build a life together. After my art exhibition, she said, surprising herself with how quickly she'd decided. After the exhibition in 2 weeks, I want to move in with you. I want us to start our life together officially. I'm ready, Gabriel. Finally, completely ready. They kissed then, with Oliver playing contentedly at their feet, and Natalie felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it, not a fairy tale, not a perfect romance, but a genuine partnership built on honesty and respect and the daily choice to love each other. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Natalie's art exhibition was scheduled for the first Saturday in December, and as the date approached, her anxiety escalated to near-panic levels. These paintings were so personal, so raw, documenting her journey from betrayal through survival to eventual healing. Displaying them publicly felt like stripping naked in front of strangers, inviting judgment and criticism of her most vulnerable moments. But Patricia insisted on attending, bringing several of her wealthy friends who were prominent art collectors. Lena came with a small contingent from her law firm. Gabriel was there, of course, with Oliver in a baby carrier, ready to provide moral support. And to Natalie's surprise, Dominic asked if he could attend, not as her ex-husband, but as someone who'd been part of the story these paintings told, who wanted to support her artistic success even though it documented his own failures. Natalie had initially said no, thinking his presence would be too weird, too complicated. But then she'd reconsidered. These paintings were about transformation, about taking pain and creating beauty from it. Having Dominic there would be the ultimate proof that she'd moved beyond simply surviving what he'd done to actually thriving despite it. The gallery opening was packed, far more people than the small cooperative had expected. News of the scandal artist, as one local paper had unfortunately dubbed Natalie, had spread, and curiosity drew people who might not otherwise have attended. But as they walked through the exhibition, as they saw the progression of paintings from dark despair through gradual hope to final brilliant color, the casual curiosity transformed into genuine appreciation. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a massive canvas Natalie had completed just weeks earlier. Titled Phoenix Rising, it showed a woman holding a baby, standing in the ashes of what had once been a beautiful house. But instead of looking back at the destruction, the woman was facing forward, and in the distance, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold and luminous blue. The woman's face showed not grief but determination, not defeat but strength. And the baby in her arms was reaching toward that sunrise, tiny hands grasping at possibility. Natalie stood next to the painting, watching people's reactions, and felt pride swelling in her chest. This was her story, told in color and light and shadow. This was her testimony to survival, to the strength that comes from having everything destroyed and choosing to rebuild anyway. Patricia approached her with tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "It's beautiful," she said simply. "All of it. You've taken something so painful and created something transcendent. I'm in awe of you, Natalie." Dominic came next, standing in front of the Phoenix Rising painting for a long time before speaking. "I'm in here, aren't I?" he said quietly. "The destroyed house. That's our marriage, our life together that I burned down." "Yes," Natalie confirmed, not sugarcoating it. "But I'm not in the forward part," Dominic continued. "The part with the sunrise and the new beginning. That's deliberate, isn't it? You're showing that your future doesn't include me." "Not the way our past included you," Natalie agreed. "You'll always be Oliver's father, always be connected to me through him. But my future, my happiness, my new life, that's not about you anymore. It's about me, about what I'm building for myself and my son." "I understand," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I'm glad. Truly. You deserve a future that's about more than just recovering from what I did to you." Gabriel appeared then, Oliver awake and alert in his carrier, taking in the gallery chaos with wide eyes. He put his arm around Natalie's shoulders, a casual gesture of possession and partnership that made Dominic look away briefly, but when he looked back, his expression was accepting, even supportive. "Your work is extraordinary," Gabriel told Natalie. "Every person in here is talking about how powerful it is, how much emotion you've captured. You're going to sell every piece tonight." He was right. By the end of the evening, every painting had a red dot beside it indicating it had been sold. Natalie had made more money in one night than she'd made in the previous 6 months combined. Gallery owners from larger venues were giving her their cards, asking about future shows. Art critics were taking photos and notes for reviews. Her gamble on exposing her pain so publicly had paid off in ways she never could have anticipated. At the end of the night, after the last guests had filtered out and the gallery owners were counting receipts with expressions of delighted shock, Natalie stood in the center of the empty space with Gabriel and Oliver, looking at the walls that had held her story. "I did it," she said, wonder in her voice. "I actually did it. I survived everything that happened, and I turned it into something beautiful." "You did more than survive," Gabriel corrected. "You transformed. You took what was meant to destroy you and used it to become stronger, more authentic, more yourself." Patricia appeared one last time before leaving, pulling Natalie into a hug. "I have one more gift for you," she said, handing Natalie an envelope. "Open it later, when you're home and have time to process. But know that it comes with no strings, no expectations. Just a grandmother wanting to ensure her grandson and his remarkable mother have every opportunity to thrive." After Patricia left, after the gallery owners locked up and everyone went their separate ways, Natalie, Gabriel, and Oliver went back to Gabriel's apartment, not the borrowed space where Natalie had been living, but Gabriel's home that would soon be their home together. They put Oliver to bed in the portable crib Gabriel had set up in what would become the nursery, and then settled on the couch together, exhausted but happy. Should we see what Patricia gave you? Gabriel asked, nodding toward the envelope Natalie had set on the coffee table. Natalie opened it with slight trepidation, uncertain what kind of gift would require such mysterious presentation. Inside was a letter and several legal documents. The letter read, "Dearest Natalie, watching you tonight, seeing your strength and talent and grace, I was reminded of something my late husband used to say: the measure of a person isn't what they do when life is easy, but who they become when everything falls apart. By that measure, you are extraordinary. I know I cannot undo the pain my son caused you. I cannot give you back the years of struggle, the moments you faced alone, the suffering you endured. But I can help ensure that Oliver's future is secure, and that you have the foundation to continue building the beautiful life you've created. Enclosed you'll find the deed to the apartment you've been staying in. My daughter, Gabriel's sister, has decided to extend her travels indefinitely and wants to sell. I've purchased it and am transferring ownership to you. It's yours, completely and without obligation. Use it as you see fit, live in it, rent it out, sell it if you prefer. It's simply a tool to provide stability and options. Additionally, I've established an education trust for Oliver that cannot be touched by any legal proceedings or business failures. His future education is secure, regardless of what happens with Dominic's remaining legal complications. Finally, I've connected you with 3 gallery owners in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles who specialize in contemporary emotional art. They're expecting your call and are interested in showing your work. Your talent deserves a platform larger than our local cooperative gallery, as wonderful as tonight was. These gifts come with no strings and no expectations. You owe me nothing beyond what you're already giving, a chance to be Oliver's grandmother, to be part of his life, to watch him grow. That privilege is more than enough. With love and profound respect, Patricia." Natalie read the letter twice, then looked at the deed confirming that the apartment she'd been living in now belonged to her, free and clear. She looked at Gabriel, unable to find words for the enormity of what Patricia had done. "She gave you a home," Gabriel said softly. "She gave you security and opportunity and the chance to build your art career without financial desperation driving every decision." "I don't deserve this," Natalie whispered. "I didn't do anything to earn it." "You loved her grandson when his father wasn't capable of being there," Gabriel countered. "You gave her a chance to be a grandmother despite having every reason to cut her out of your life. You found the evidence that freed her son from prison even though you had no obligation to help him. You've earned this, Natalie. Maybe not in traditional ways, but you've absolutely earned it." Natalie set the papers aside and leaned into Gabriel's embrace, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden influx of good things after so much struggle. A successful exhibition. Financial security. A home of her own. A partner who loved her. A son who was healthy and happy. A former mother-in-law who transformed from adversary to ally. A career that was suddenly full of possibility. It was almost too much good fortune, too complete a reversal from the darkness of a year ago. Part of her wanted to distrust it, to wait for the other shoe to drop, to protect herself against the inevitable return of hardship. But another part, the part that had learned to hope again, to trust in good things, to believe that she deserved happiness, chose to simply accept the gifts life was offering. "I love you," she told Gabriel. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for waiting while I figured out how to let myself be loved again." "Always," Gabriel promised. "I'm not going anywhere, Natalie. This is just the beginning for us." And as they sat together in the quiet apartment, with their son sleeping peacefully in the next room and a future full of possibility stretching ahead, Natalie realized that the climactic resolution she'd been waiting for wasn't some dramatic final confrontation or earth-shattering revelation. It was this, the quiet joy of being exactly where she needed to be, with people who loved her, building the life she'd always deserved but never thought possible. 6 months later, in early June when the weather had turned warm and everything felt alive with possibility, Natalie and Gabriel got married in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. It wasn't the elaborate wedding Natalie had dreamed of as a young woman, nor was it the courthouse quickie that some might expect from practical adults with limited time and resources. It was something perfectly in between, intimate but meaningful, simple but beautiful, exactly right for who they were and what they built together. Oliver served as ring bearer at 18 months old, carried down the aisle by Lena while he clutched a small pillow with the rings attached. He was wearing a tiny suit that Patricia had bought him, and his dark hair had finally grown long enough to curl slightly at the ends, making him look impossibly cherubic. When he saw Natalie standing at the front in her simple cream-colored dress, he made his happy sound, a joyful squeal that made all the guests laugh, and reached for her with both arms. Dominic was there, sitting in the back with his mother, and if it pained him to watch his ex-wife marry another man, he didn't show it. He'd been working construction since his release, rebuilding his life from the ground up. His exoneration had been official for months now, his record completely expunged, and while he'd lost his real estate empire and the lifestyle that came with it, he'd gained something more valuable, genuine relationships built on honesty rather than image. He saw Oliver 3 times a week now, had moved into a modest apartment within walking distance of Natalie and Gabriel's home, and was slowly becoming the father he'd always had the potential to be. The ceremony itself was brief, officiated by a judge who was friends with Lena. Natalie and Gabriel exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about showing up every day, about choosing each other even when things got difficult, about building a family based on honesty and respect and the kind of love that wasn't just feeling but action. "I promise to be Oliver's father in all the ways that matter," Gabriel said, looking down at the toddler who was now squirming in Natalie's arms. "To love him as my own, to guide him and support him, to be present for every milestone and every struggle. I promise to honor the family you've built and to work every day to be worthy of being part of it." "I promise to trust you," Natalie said, her voice thick with emotion. "To let you in completely, to stop protecting myself against hurt that you've never given me reason to expect. I promise to build our future together, to make space for your dreams alongside mine, to be your partner in every sense of the word. And I promise to never forget what we've both learned, that love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing to show up, every single day, and doing the work of really seeing each other." When they kissed, Oliver clapped enthusiastically, having learned this was the appropriate response to kissing at the several weddings Patricia had dragged him to recently. The guests laughed and applauded, and Natalie felt a completeness she'd never experienced before, not the desperate, grasping need for someone to complete her, but the satisfied wholeness of being fully herself while choosing to build a life with someone who saw and valued all of who she was. The reception was held in Patricia's garden, which she'd insisted on hosting despite Natalie's protests that it was too generous. But Patricia had been adamant, "My grandson's family deserves to celebrate properly, and I have the space. Let me do this. Let me contribute to his happiness." There was dancing and laughter and toasts that were both funny and touching. Lena gave a speech about watching Natalie transform from devastated divorcee to thriving artist and mother, about the privilege of witnessing someone's complete metamorphosis. Patricia spoke about second chances and the importance of family, chosen family, biological family, all the complicated configurations that love could take. And Dominic, in a move that surprised everyone including himself, stood up and offered his own toast. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't weird," he started, getting a few nervous laughs. "Watching your ex-wife marry someone else is objectively strange. But here's what I've learned over the past year and a half: love isn't about ownership. It's not about controlling someone or keeping them in a box of your own making. Real love is wanting someone to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you the way you once imagined it would." He looked at Natalie directly. "I had the privilege of being married to an extraordinary woman, and I destroyed that gift through my own selfishness and cowardice. But that woman," he gestured toward Natalie, "she took that destruction and built something beautiful from it. She raised our son alone when I wasn't capable of showing up. She found evidence that freed me from prison when she had every reason to let me rot there. She's been gracious and fair in co-parenting despite having every justification to make things difficult. And now she's found someone who treats her the way I never did, with consistent respect, genuine partnership, and the kind of love that's proven through daily actions rather than grand gestures." He raised his glass. "So here's to Natalie and Gabriel. May your marriage be everything mine wasn't. May you build the kind of family that Oliver deserves to grow up in. And may you always remember that the best revenge against past betrayal is living so well that the past becomes irrelevant. You've done that, Natalie. You've absolutely done that." The toast received enthusiastic applause, and Natalie felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness or regret, but from the profound recognition that she'd actually made it through. She'd survived betrayal and scandal and single motherhood and financial crisis and all the countless challenges that had been thrown at her, and she'd emerged not just intact but thriving. She'd built a career as an artist, become the mother Oliver needed, found a partner who genuinely loved her, and created a support system that was as strong as any biological family. As the evening progressed and the sun began to set, casting golden light across Patricia's garden, Natalie found herself standing slightly apart from the celebration, just watching. Watching Oliver being passed around by various guests who cooed over him. Watching Gabriel deep in conversation with some of her artist friends, already integrated into her world. Watching Dominic chatting amiably with Lena about some legal case she was working on, the two of them having developed an unlikely friendship based on their shared love for Oliver. Watching Patricia holding court with her society friends, looking more relaxed and genuinely happy than Natalie had ever seen her. Gabriel appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Moretti?" "Mrs. Moretti," Natalie repeated, testing out her new name. "That's going to take some getting used to. I was Natalie Rivers for so long, first as a single woman, then during my marriage when I kept my name, then as a single mother. And before that, I was Natalie Foster, bouncing through different homes, never quite belonging anywhere. But Mrs. Moretti, that feels like finally landing somewhere permanent. Like finally having a real home." "You've always had a home," Gabriel corrected gently. "You've been building it piece by piece, in your art, in your relationship with Oliver, in your friendships and chosen family. I'm just lucky enough to get to be part of what you've created." "We're creating it together now," Natalie said. "That's the difference. For so long, everything was just me, fighting and struggling and building alone. But now I have you. We're partners, actually partners, in all of it." Oliver toddled over then, having escaped from whoever had been entertaining him, and crashed into Natalie's legs with the full-body enthusiasm only toddlers possess. She scooped him up, settling him on her hip, and he immediately reached for Gabriel, wanting to be held by both his parents simultaneously, a physical impossibility that he nonetheless demanded regularly. Gabriel took him, lifting him high and making him giggle, and Natalie watched them together with a fullness in her chest that felt almost painful in its intensity. This was her family. Not the family she'd imagined when she married Dominic, but the family she'd actually needed. The family that chose each other every day, that worked through complications rather than running from them, that built foundations on honesty rather than illusion. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Natalie found herself talking with Patricia one last time. They stood at the edge of the garden, watching Oliver play with some of the other children who'd attended the wedding, and Patricia took Natalie's hand in her own. "Thank you," Patricia said simply. "For giving me a second chance. For letting me be part of Oliver's life despite having every reason to shut me out. For showing me what real strength looks like. You've changed my life, Natalie. You've made me want to be better, to be the kind of grandmother, the kind of person that my husband always believed I could be." "You've changed mine too," Natalie replied honestly. "I never expected to find such an ally in you. I never expected us to become friends, I guess. But I'm grateful we did. Oliver is lucky to have you as his grandmother. And I'm lucky to have you as his mother," Patricia countered. "The best thing my son ever did was marry you, and the worst thing he ever did was let you go. But his loss was Gabriel's gain, and ultimately Oliver's gain. Everything worked out exactly as it needed to." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun finish its descent and the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. And Natalie thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that courthouse parking lot with a 3-week-old baby and a mission to shock her ex-husband, through all the struggles and challenges and moments of despair, to this garden, this evening, this celebration of new beginnings. She thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, broken, desperate, functioning on determination and spite and the primal need to protect her child. That woman had been strong, certainly, but it was a brittle strength, born of necessity rather than choice. The woman she was now was strong in a different way, flexible rather than brittle, rooted in genuine self-knowledge rather than desperate defense, capable of vulnerability without losing power. She'd lost so much on this journey. The marriage she believed in, the future she'd planned, the financial security she'd taken for granted. But she'd gained even more. A career that fulfilled her creatively. A partner who loved her completely. A son who was thriving. A found family that was stronger than many biological ones. And most importantly, herself, the truest, most authentic version of herself that she'd ever been. As the party wound down and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, just a long weekend at a cabin in the mountains, because they couldn't be away from Oliver for too long, Dominic approached one final time. He hugged Natalie carefully, respectfully, in the way of people who once knew each other intimately but now maintain appropriate boundaries. Be happy, he told her. That's all I want for you now. Just be happy. I am, Natalie assured him. Finally, completely, I am. And she meant it. She was happy, not in the delusional, everything is perfect way that denial sometimes masquerades as happiness, but in the deep, grounded way that comes from having survived the worst and built something beautiful from the ruins. She was happy with complications and challenges still ahead, with an ex-husband who would always be part of her life through Oliver, with a past that couldn't be erased or forgotten. She was happy with reality rather than fantasy, with authenticity rather than illusion, with chosen love rather than obligated connection. 3 years later, Natalie stood in a prestigious Manhattan gallery at the opening of her first major solo exhibition. Critics had called her work transformative, brutally honest, the visual representation of survival and metamorphosis. The show was titled Phoenix Chronicles, and it documented her entire journey, from the dark paintings of her divorce through the gradual lightening as she found her footing as a single mother, to the brilliant colors of new love and family and authentic happiness. Oliver, now 4 years old and starting to show signs of inheriting both his mother's artistic talent and his father's business acumen, ran around the gallery with Patricia in patient pursuit. He'd asked earlier why all these people were looking at Mommy's paintings, and Natalie had tried to explain that sometimes when you turn your pain into art, people want to see it because it helps them understand their own pain. Oliver had considered this seriously and then asked, "But you're not in pain anymore, right, Mommy?" "No, baby," Natalie had assured him. "I'm not in pain anymore. I'm happy." Gabriel stood beside her now, one hand resting on her lower back in a gesture of support and connection. Next to him, in a stroller, their 6-month-old daughter Emma slept peacefully, oblivious to the celebration around her. They decided to have another child together, wanting Oliver to have a sibling, wanting to create more family, wanting to continue building the life they'd started. Dominic was there too, having taken time off from the construction company he now managed to attend his ex-wife's triumph. He'd brought his girlfriend, a kindergarten teacher named Rachel who was kind and steady and exactly what he needed. They'd been together for over a year, and Dominic was taking it slowly this time, learning from his mistakes, building a relationship based on genuine compatibility rather than excitement or escape. As Natalie watched her various family members, biological, chosen, complicated, all gathered to celebrate her success, she felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The betrayal that had destroyed her marriage had also freed her to become the person she was always meant to be. The scandal that had threatened to ruin her had ultimately given her story the authenticity that made her art resonate with others. The struggles that had nearly broken her had instead forged her into someone stronger, more genuine, more fully herself than she'd ever been. At the end of the evening, after the gallery had closed and they were heading home through the New York streets, Gabriel pulled her close and asked, "Do you ever regret how things worked out? Do you ever wish Dominic hadn't cheated, that your marriage had survived, that you'd had the life you originally planned?" Natalie thought about that question, really thought about it, giving it the serious consideration it deserved. She thought about the person she'd been in that marriage, how she'd been slowly shrinking herself to fit into Dominic's vision of who she should be. She thought about the art she hadn't created, the strengths she hadn't discovered, the depths of love she hadn't known were possible. "No," she said finally, with absolute certainty. "I don't regret how things worked out. I'm sorry Oliver has to navigate divorced parents and complicated family dynamics. I'm sorry for the pain I went through and the struggles that could have been avoided. But I don't regret where I ended up. This life, with you, with our children, with my art and my found family and my authentic self, this is better than anything I imagined when I was married to Dominic. Not easier, but better. More real. More me." "Good," Gabriel said, kissing her temple. "Because I wouldn't change a single thing about how our story unfolded. Every struggle, every challenge, everything that happened brought you to that day when you moved into the apartment next door. Brought you into my life. Made us into a family. They walked home through the city that never sleeps, with Oliver holding Gabriel's hand and babbling about everything he'd seen at the gallery, with Emma sleeping peacefully in her stroller, with the weight of successful evening and promising future settling over them like a blessing. And Natalie thought about that courthouse parking lot, about sitting in her car with a 3-week-old baby and a plan to shock her ex-husband, about how far she'd come from that moment of desperate determination. She'd arrived for the divorce with a newborn baby, and Dominic had been there with his lover. He'd been left in shock. But the real shock hadn't been Oliver's existence, it had been watching Natalie transform from the woman he'd left behind into someone he no longer recognized, someone stronger and more authentic and more complete than she'd ever been during their marriage. And now, years later, with a family she'd built on choice and love and daily commitment, with a career that fulfilled her creatively, with a partner who saw and valued all of who she was, Natalie understood something profound. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, because it forces you to become who you were always meant to be. She'd arrived for the divorce with a newborn baby, and she'd walked away with her entire life transformed. And if given the choice to go back and prevent the betrayal, to save the marriage, to avoid all the pain and struggle, she wouldn't take it. Because this life, this messy, complicated, beautiful life she'd built from the ashes of her destroyed marriage, was exactly what she needed. Exactly what she deserved. Exactly who she'd always been meant to become. And that was the most satisfying ending of all. So beautiful souls, what did you think of Natalie's incredible journey? Did watching her transform from devastated wife to thriving single mother to happily remarried woman inspire you? Did Dominic's fall and eventual redemption feel earned, or do you think some betrayals are simply unforgivable? And what about Gabriel? Did you love how patient and steady he was, how he proved that real love is about showing up consistently rather than grand romantic gestures? I want to hear all your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Tell me what resonated with you, what made you cry, what made you cheer. Tell me if you've been through anything similar, if Natalie's story helped you process your own experiences. This community is built on sharing and supporting each other, and your stories matter just as much as the ones I tell. And listen, if this story moved you, if it made you feel something real and important, I need you to do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Seriously, just reach out and tap it. It helps other people find these stories, helps them find the inspiration and hope they might desperately need right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Because we've got so many more coming your way, stories about survival and transformation, about love lost and found, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of impossible circumstances. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to rebuild after everything falls apart. Share it with your best friend who's going through a divorce. Share it with your sister who's struggling as a single parent. Share it with anyone who needs to remember that strength isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up every single time, no matter how hard you've been hit. And here's what I want you to remember as you go about your day, as you face whatever challenges are waiting for you, you are stronger than you know. You are capable of surviving things you can't imagine surviving right now. And you deserve love that shows up, consistently and genuinely, not just in the easy moments but especially in the hard ones. Don't settle for less than that. Don't accept betrayal or neglect or being treated as less than you are. Because you reading this right now, you deserve to be cherished, supported, and loved completely. Until next time, beautiful souls, remember, your story isn't over. The chapter you're in right now, however difficult, is just one chapter. There are so many more pages to be written, so many more plot twists and character developments and surprising moments of joy ahead. Keep turning those pages. Keep writing your story. And keep showing up for yourself the way Natalie showed up for herself and Oliver. I love you all. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for letting me share these stories with you. See you in the next one. Stay strong. Stay hopeful. Stay beautifully, authentically you.